Greetings, everyone. It is your girl, Marcy Thomas, here with you for another episode of the BGC Book Club. Well, just to let you know off the top, if you're thinking we're live, we are not actually live right now. This is a pre-recorded session that I had the opportunity to do with a lovely and talented authoress, as they said on Girlfriends, authoress who is actually coming to us from London. So this is pre-recorded, so just be aware of that. But I am coming to you from the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. And again, as I said, excited for another opportunity to talk to you about a book that's been on the horizon for just about a month here in the United States. So as you come in the room, please feel free to drop where you're joining us from, because believe it or not, I do go back and read those comments. So it's always good to know who was here with us in the room for these wonderful conversations. So for this occasion, I'm really excited to talk to Maame Blue, who is the author of The Rest of You. That rhymes. I don't know if she did that on purpose, but it does rhyme. So I'm really excited to talk to her about her new book. Now, she is a Ghanaian Londoner and an award-winning author of the novel Bad Love, which won the 2021 Betty Trask Award and was shortlisted for the Betty Trask Prize. She has been a scriptwriter on the Venezuelan telenovela Remix for African audiences, and her short stories have appeared in several international anthologies, including Not Right for Us, New Australian Fiction 2020, and Joyful Joyful. She is a recipient of the 2022 Society of Authors Traveling Scholarship and was a 2022 POCC Artist in Residence. Maame contributes regularly to Writer's Mosaic and has written pieces for Refinery 29, Black Ballad, and Society of Authors magazine. She is a Faber Academy and City Lit creative writing tutor and regularly runs creative writing workshops. And as I've already mentioned, she lives in London. So we want to welcome Maame to the BGC Book Club for the very first time, and we know it won't be the last. So let's welcome her to the room.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for welcoming me. Hi, Marcy. Hi, everyone.
Yes. It's so exciting to have you here to be able to talk about not your first work, but this is your first work that's actually being published in the United States. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. The first
Yes.
one was just UK. I'm excited for this one to travel a bit more.
Yes. So first of all, congratulations, because that's a pretty big feat for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes. So how has it been for the book was out on October 8th, correct? So how has it been for
Yes.
the last few?
It's been great. The book's gotten on some like recommendation lists, which has been really amazing. I think it was in like Essence, and it was in Ebony magazine, and I was kind of like, wow. I sent it to my mum.
Wow, that
She was like,
is.
big deal. I'm really excited for it to be out, and it's kind of going around book bloggers, and I'm getting some good feedback so far. But I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of the work, so I'm really excited to talk about it. I'm still getting used to talking about it as well, so you have
Right.
to bear
It's especially
with
reaching a whole entirely new audience. So, and then I'm showing
Yes.
the cover again
Yeah.
because it is a beautiful cover. We'll get into that
Mhm.
here, before we finish up for the day. But I can imagine that is different because you have, an audience that maybe you've been accustomed to writing for and now reaching a new audience. So, how does that part of it feel?
I think I think it's interesting because I feel like as a reader, like I consume also a lot of, I would say, Black American kind of entertainment, and that's what I grew up on, you know, and kind of books as well. And so it's interesting that in the book itself none of it is set in America at all,
Mm-mm.
but I think the themes of diaspora being part of something bigger or trying to find your kind of roots, I think it's something about it that seems to speak to an American audience. And I think that was definitely the conversations that I was having with my publishers when they decided to pick up the book. They said, it spoke to this idea of trying to find who you are based on things that happened before you even
Yeah.
existed, as
Yes.
it were.
It definitely resonated. As I told you before we started this recording, that I enjoyed the book. There are so many things that I could relate to. And there are pieces in there that definitely speak to your knowledge of Black American culture. Because I'm like, oh, okay, so watching the same TV shows, some of the same music and things like that. So, a lot of times people want to have all these differentiations of whether you're a Black American or, Jamaican or whatever,
Mm.
wherever you come from. But there are certain things that we all can relate to just as being a part of the diaspora.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. And I think to your point, like, yes, there's a lot of, and I know we'll get into this, but there's a lot of music in the book, as you would have read, and a lot of kind of reference to like soul music and R&B. And again, especially for me growing up in London, it's a really big part of just what we grew up with. And so I like that everything isn't so, there are so many more global themes, and especially in how we live our lives now, that I think we see a lot more of each other, as we say, across the diaspora than perhaps we did 10, 15 years ago, just because of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that definitely went into the experience of the character that I was trying to create in the rest of you. So I hope that speaks to people anyway.
Yes. Well, before we get into some of the details of the story,
Yeah.
you talk about this was it took several years to get this book. It started during the pandemic. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. 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 It was yes, it was. I keep saying this. I probably should stop saying it, but it was a little bit like drawing blood from a stone, and I say that because my first book, Bad Love, it's about like situationships, and it's fun. It was very fun to write, and it was easy, and it just flowed. No one was waiting for it. It was just for me,
Right.
and then it was later that it got, like picked up and published. Whereas this book, we were in the pandemic, we were just at home, and I knew I had this story, but it was to really taking time to get
Mhm.
out on the page. And then I went to eventually, I think lockdown ended a little bit, and I went to an event, and somebody at the event said to me like, "Oh, well, how's the second book going?" And I was like, "Oh, it's whatever. Let's not talk about it." And they said, "Well, what worked with the first book?" And I was like, well, the first one, I was traveling a lot. So I
Okay.
wrote Bad Love. I was in airports, and I was in Australia at one point. I was in New York at one point. I was in France, I think, at one point. I was just on the move a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I happened to be. And I was like, oh, yeah, that worked. I was on the move. Something about being on the move, I always find writing just flows. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that's what I was missing with this. That's why I was
Mm-hmm.
finding it so hard. Of course, I wasn't on the move. We're in lockdown. We can't go anywhere. This is a pandemic. And I was like, oh, so it literally became, if I'm on the tube, I'm writing on my phone. Suddenly it was flowing, and it was just like having a little change of scenery that propelled something. Just
Wow.
going somewhere else, just literally going to a coffee shop for a couple of hours instead of being at home. Suddenly it was flowing. And it was kind of like some of it was just, oh, I realized I had to tap back into whatever worked the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's a piece of advice I like hold dear, and I will share with everyone who is a writer who I talk to about trying to get that second thing done, which is think about what worked the first time and try to recreate it if you can.
I love that. That's really
Yeah.
great advice. And I like the fact that when you were talking, it made me think. I don't know if you've ever read Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
But yes, in The Artist's Way, one of the things she talks about, of course, getting up and writing every day, which, some people do that, some people don't,
Mhm.
even as a writer, because you have to fit it into the rest of your life, right?
Yes.
But one of the things that she talks about is going on artist dates and how the artist date kind of spurs your mind to do different things or think differently
Mm.
or embrace new ideas. So when you said what you said about being out in the world, I related it to that, because when you get out in the world, because if you look behind me, they're paintings. They're actually my
Yes.
paintings. I haven't
Beautiful.
done any in a while, but
Wow.
every time I go and see someone else's art, it spurs ideas. So
Yes.
that's definitely a thing.
100% that as well. Yeah, I think that's been something I've had to relearn over and over again, in that kind of, when I'm like, oh, I should just be writing, I should be writing. And it's like, actually, the space when you're not writing is also part of the work, and that, or when you're not creating, like you say. And actually, I get the most out of, yeah, I'll go to a gallery, and or I'll just take in some street art. And especially, obviously, I live in London, like that's a great place
Right.
for that, for you to just find that. Or just I go and see a film or something, and
Right.
it gives you that. This thing I think about, like creative rest, I think is so important in just giving your mind, time to think of the thing.
hmm And
Yeah.
it's storytelling in that. And actually, there's some art in your book. So I wasn't even thinking about that conversation when I was thinking about what to ask you, but it just kind of the natural flow of that.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't had the chance to read the rest of you yet, tell us, what the story is about.
Yeah, so the rest of you kind of, it has a dual timeline. So it's set in present day London, and then Ghana in Kumasi in the mid 90s, 1995. Kind of one of our main characters is Whitney. She's in the present day. So she is kind of turning 30. The book opens, she's in a club surrounded by people, and she feels completely alone. And she's essentially, because of something that's happened, she's had a memory kind of triggered, but it's more of a body memory than it is the thing that's happened. She doesn't know what it is. She just knows she's having some kind of reaction to it. And she's a masseuse. So, everything in her body, she's kind of very in tune with it. And so we follow her trying to kind of uncover what this memory is, whilst also how it impacts her interacting with her friends and family. And then the other side of the timeline is it's Ghana, it's the mid 90s, and Whitney is actually a toddler. And there's three women who are taking care of her two aunties, and their house help. And the decision that these three women make, a reaction they have something that happens in the past, has an impact then on Whitney's life in the present. And so we're kind of following these two timelines uh, to see, let's say, how they interact. That's
Yeah.
me trying to describe it without giving any spoilers.
Right, right. So if
Yeah.
you have never watched BGC Book Club before, just know you're not going to get spoilers, but you are going to get, like some little appetizers, little
Yeah.
teasers to let you know what you can expect in the story. And that was a good way of,
Oh,
kind of letting people know what to expect, without
perfect.
diving deep. But, here we always like to talk about the themes. So well, themes as well as process. So we've already talked a little bit about how it took you a while to write, but before we get into some of the characters themselves, what was it like for you telling these two different
Mm.
timelines, really four different points of view?
Yeah, I usually love to read like a dual timeline, or not even a dual timeline, but multiple characters, like not Transcendent Kingdom. Goodness. It's completely gone out of my brain, but Yajasi's first
Mhm.
book. Where she kind of, there's multiple people following the story. I really like reading that, but I never thought I would be able to write something like that. And this book essentially just started with the London chapters. It was just
Okay.
Whitney's story. That was going to be the whole book. It was just present day London, her trying to uncover this thing. And then at the same time, I was researching I thought it was going to be a second book
Mhm.
in Ghana, and that was
Okay.
going to be the kind of companion piece. And I ended up traveling to Ghana and doing some, like, being there after not being there for many years. To kind of interview people and find out how they migrated, and talk to like aunties and uncles and just all kinds of people about their experience of going from one place to another. And before I even made that trip, I was talking to my agent, and she'd read the London bits, and she was like, "Oh, this is good. Like, I really like it." Da, 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 da. She was like, "I feel like it's missing something. I feel like it's missing Ghana bits." And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go."
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Like, she already knew. Like, I was like, "Okay, great." As soon as I got there, I wrote the second half of the book in like a month.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was like something unlocked in going to Ghana, being there, and I couldn't, the Ghana bits, and obviously you've read it. I couldn't have written them if I hadn't gone there. I think it wouldn't have just I wouldn't have been able to conjure it up in the same way. And it just flowed, and so that those voices, they just came, and I had
Wow.
been thinking about them for a long time, but I hadn't been able to embody them in the way that I did as soon as I was there. And as soon as I read it, it was just like, oh, this is one book.
Right.
This isn't two. This is one. Yeah, and so it kind of, I don't want to say it's like an out of body experience, but something about obviously being there, it just needed to flow in that direction.
Mm.
For there to then just be these multiple narratives that felt very real to me by the time they were on the page.
Yes, and hearing you say that, I'm glad I asked that question because
Mm.
in reading the book, I can't imagine it any other way.
Yeah. Me either now, either. Yeah, it's crazy.
Because I mean, it's one of those things. That it's that backstory
Hmm.
to kind of understand what's going on. Because I liken it to, like, say if you go and you watch a movie, because we talked about watching films or television programs or whatever.
Mm.
When you see a pilot or whatever, and there's nothing to like give you any kind of backstory, like why these characters, why now, type of
Mm.
thing. So.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, and I think because in my head I was like, oh, I'm gonna answer this later. I
Mhm,
wasn't thinking about how actually, yeah, it's a gap. And of course, as you would have read, the theme of gaps is
mhm,
throughout.
mhm,
Uh and I
mhm.
realized actually some of them I need to fill. And
Well,
actually
there might be a
it would
second.
make sense. And there's still, yeah, if there is,
Novella,
it
something
might not
short,
be, maybe something short, maybe a little like, yeah, offshoot perhaps.
something.
But yeah, yeah.
But yes. Well, just to get into the characters, of course, we start with Whitney, and we've already kind of talked about the fact of, Black music, Black American music. So, of course, Whitney, and she had her mother, her aunts all had
Mm.
these names of Black American songstresses.
Yes, they do.
So I love that, and just to see that, because it also pays an homage to them as well, just in having them be named that way.
Hmm.
But looking at Whitney, she is, turning 30 years old, which is many times a very trying time for us, regardless of what our backstory is, just because,
Absolutely.
when you're young, you think that 30 is old, but then once you get past 30, you think they're babies. Oh, that's just a baby. What do you
Oh, baby.
but I mean, but it is a thing, and we
Yeah.
watch. The story begins on her birthday, and she's really, grappling with these different things of turning 30. So in that way, the story kind of feels like a coming of age in that regard.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I think I'm always, and those are the stories I'm most interested in, probably those turning points in
Mm,
our lives, where we usually learn a bit more about ourselves, or we've had a number of experiences that have made us question certain things about what we know or what we don't know. And
mhm,
so I wanted to show her kind of on the cusp of this place in her life where she might be ready to ask questions that she wasn't really ready to hear the answers to before, perhaps. Like
mhm,
she wasn't kind of, yeah, in that place. To be honest, and I think it's a theme, it's definitely a theme in my work. I like the internal character struggle. And yeah, and exactly that coming of age, but in a way where it doesn't necessarily go the way that we might think if I think of a coming of age,
right,
story.
right.
Yeah, it's much more about her, even not even yes, learning about herself, but also learning more about the people in her life and
Right.
what that means about who she is.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Because she has had a very her upbringing is different.
Hmm.
She's and this isn't really giving anything away, but she's been raised by family members. And so there are gaps of not knowing, what happened with her parents. And
Yes.
like in a lot of families, there are these secrets of things that people don't want to tell. So that's a whole theme as well. People not really
Hmm.
being honest about the things that are going on around them.
Yeah, and I would say that that also speaks a lot to like my experience in the diaspora, like my friends who I've grown up with, any of us who have uh especially, I mean, not specifically Ghanaian to be honest, but West African parents. If you're just a parent who is an immigrant, uh,
Mhm,
who had a life somewhere else before they came here,
mhm,
um and so it's different to the one that you have then grown up with. There's that kind of, the gaps are, they're just there. And what I found, I guess, also in what was really healing for me in writing the book was, by the time I was at the point of talking to elders and being
Right.
in Ghana, and really they were very open in a
Hmm.
way that when I was a child, that was not
It wouldn't have been because you're a child,
wasn't
it's
the
none of
case.
your business,
It's
right?
none of your business. Exactly. Whereas by this point, they were kind of like, they'd left and gone back to Ghana.
Mhm.
So obviously I'm talking specifically about Ghana. So um and so they had a whole, there was a different kind of reflection, different perspective on life, but they were just very open about these things that had previously been like, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, you
Mm.
made this decision because why, or oh, this has happened, you know um that really fed into then actually putting together the pieces of uh Margloria, who is Whitney's, the woman that raises Whitney's her
Yeah.
auntie, one of her aunties. The pieces of her life that Whitney wasn't cognizant of. Whitney was a child and wouldn't have known about. Um, and that Whitney, now the gaps that she's trying to fill, even though, and trying to understand that Margloria was a whole person before she existed.
Yes.
That
Yes.
bit.
That was the good part about telling her story and having parts
Mm,
of the story told from her point of view, because we got to see, okay, a lot of times we think, oh, my mama, my grandmama, my auntie, whatever, that's all that they are. But we could
hmm
see this was a woman that Ma Gloria, named after Gloria Gaynor,
Yep.
I was which even that makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense. But just looking at her and understanding that there was a life that she had,
hmm
continues to have, and maybe there's some things she might have done differently. But she, being thrust into situations at a young age and having to make certain decisions as well. But
hmm
the young Whitney, of course we know Whitney, we know who she's named after.
Yeah.
But it's like being able to like look and say, oh, well, there's more to this person than what she did just in raising me.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And I think I have find, and again, I think the reason I also made Whitney 30 is, I think there's like enough of a time where, for a lot of people, that is the time when you start going back and having conversations with
Mhm.
your elders, and you feel a bit, maybe you feel a bit braver, and you
Right.
or you feel a bit more like, oh, there's more scope for me to actually, find out how this thing happened, um because a lot of that fills the gaps in, to like, oh, this is who I am, or oh, this is why that thing happened in that way, or this
Mhm.
is why that person acted in that way that I didn't really understand as a child, but now I have a kind of a greater, not even appreciation for, but kind of empathy. I have a greater empathy for.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to mention her friend, so because really we
Yeah.
see the story of the aunties, and we'll get into a little bit more of that as we continue. But when the story starts, we're actually meeting Whitney and her friends as well,
hmm
and they have their own challenges that they're going through. So there are all these women in their early 30s, or
hmm
at 30 in that time frame, who are trying to figure things out and also navigating friendship and
Yes.
identity. All of these things are happening at the same time.
Yeah. And I think, and I guess, like, we know, like, especially if you're, yeah, when you're in your 20s, like, your friends are the most important
Right.
people in your life. I mean, of course, if you're very close with family, but the people that are your age, whether it's your cousins, whether it's your friends, but
Mhm.
your peers are kind of like the most important. They get the most of you at that
Right.
time. And I think that, and I really wanted that to kind of come through in the story, because that's a really big important part of Whitney's journey, is also her friends, and how she interacts with them, but also what they add to her life as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, because oftentimes, I can speak from my own experiences. There are things that my friends are going to know about me, and there are also ways that they're going to respond to things that would be
Mhm.
different from what my mom would be, or
Absolutely.
whatever. So yeah, there is that, and then just kind of, especially in a situation like with Whitney, where she doesn't have siblings, they
Mhm.
become like those siblings that you don't have.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think for sure that there's that kind of, you can see, or I hope at least it comes through, like Whitney and my Gloria have this very close relationship, even though there are lots of gaps or things Whitney doesn't know. But yes, there's a different kind of chosen family with her friends, even when there are kind of fractures in the group where
Which is natural because
yeah,
things change. When people start embarking upon romantic relationships and just different things that happen, or somebody has a baby or whatever the case may
yeah,
be, things start to change in relationships, and those are things that you have to navigate. But
absolutely.
one thing, well, a couple things, many things about Whitney. One being that her career, you touched on this a teeny bit, that she is a massage therapist, which means that she is skilled in, understanding things about the body and feeling things in the body and how she's carrying things in her own body.
Yes. And it's so, and I would say some of that came from when I was trying to, when Whitney came to my mind as a character. The fact that she was the massage therapist thing came later, but I think I definitely thought of her as, so I'll hark back. I, in a previous life, I was a psychotherapist, and
Oh,
I
okay.
was working, yes, and I was
I can see
working.
that in reading the
You
book.
can see it. Everybody says that as soon as I mention it. And I was working with clients who've experienced trauma, and a lot of it was in the body, as well as obviously psychologically. And I was thinking about when you are in recovery or you're processing stuff that you're processing repressed memories, repressed feelings, you're a lot of it does come out in your body, like physically, and I think a lot of us are kind of more cognizant to that now.
Right.
And I think there is the assumption perhaps that might make you less inclined to actually want to be in physical contact with other people if it's something that is physically happening in your body. It's not always the case. And I kind of wanted Whitney to be a person who is actually, yes, very skilled at connecting physically with other people in a way that brings them healing, even if she isn't really able to do that for herself, because you can't massage yourself. But that's literally.
Right.
I mean, you can, not as well as
Right.
someone else can do it for you, right?
Right.
And so I kind of, when that came, it made a lot of sense to me, and I kind of wanted to show that this is somebody who also has the capacity for healing, and she's not totally unaware of anything that's going on for her. She just doesn't have all the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it would be interesting to explore what happens when she finds all the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I just found that really interesting because you're right. You would think that someone that may have had some things happen to them, that's the last thing that they would want. But then there's also the part of her who doesn't, she knows something is going on, but she doesn't really quite know what it is. So
Absolutely.
there's that balance of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so what I like is how meaningful also then physical touch is to her, almost, because
Mm-hmm.
she does understand the power that she has to give that kind of this level of healing to other people, but also how significant it is to her, which means it's quite a sacred thing. And so she's not, so the thing about being, there is a point in the book where there is another club scene, and being surrounded by people feels good and not bad, because
Right.
she's surrounded by other people's energies, and that for her had previously been a really positive thing that became negative and
Mm-hmm.
then became positive again. And so I just kind of, it was fun to kind of really interrogate that and explore it a bit and follow the journey of where that could go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just of course, I know you would be aware of it. The body keeps the score, and I mean that's
Exactly.
exactly what's happening with her. And actually, she's not the only character where that shows up, but her
Mm-hmm.
specifically, we see that. Another thing, well, I just wanted to mention about the way her story is told. As I was reading it, it's almost like, I don't know what the a literary device is, but it's like she is telling her story from the outside of herself.
Mm. Because it's written in the second person.
Okay, yes.
Yes,
She's
that's it.
talking about herself, and I'm like, okay, she's still with us. The whole
Yeah.
time I'm reading, I'm thinking, is this? I didn't really know. So good job on that because I wasn't really sure. I'm like, okay,
But
she's
that's,
with us.
I think that is, I mean, so I will say, yes. So, and for people who obviously haven't read it, the half of the book is Whitney's bits are written in the second person, and I will explain what that is. And then the rest of everyone else's bits are written in a third person. So they're more like, yeah, you can see a bit more of the story. There's not it's, she.
Right.
Whereas the second person is it feels a little bit uncomfortable. It does feel like she's outside of herself, and that is its intention. And also, which is why some people hate the second person. It's like I don't know if you guys have Marmite in the US, maybe not, but what's the thing that some people hate, some people, you guys have like a candy cane. Not
Right.
candy cane, candy corn,
Corn.
if some people
Yes,
love it, some people hate it,
Halloween
right?
candy corn. Right.
Okay, yeah, it's like that. Basically, some people just can't stand it. They can't stand reading it. It's uncomfortable. Um, and I love it. I don't know. There's something about if I want to convey that this person is, uh, they're an active player in their lives, let's say, but there is a disconnect,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a bit of a watching themselves from the outside in
Mm-hmm.
element to it. I think that's what the second person voice does. And so that kind of almost unsettling, kind of self-doubty feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it does. Yeah.
As I was reading,
That's
I
what
was
it does.
like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Not that it wasn't good, but it's just like, what's happening? Why doesn't she sound like she's talking about herself and not
Yes,
really
but
expressing
you
it
feel
as
like you're reading. It can feel like you're reading a diary, or you're like watching someone through a peephole. You're watching
right,
something you're not supposed to be watching. Yeah.
right. And I mean, it all makes sense in the telling of the story. As you continue to get through it, and then ultimately, come get to the end of the story. But
Mm.
yes, that was just I wanted to bring that up because I was just like, this is different.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I promise, on purpose, on purpose.
it's on purpose. Yeah. Oh, I knew it was on purpose because it wouldn't have been published if it wasn't on purpose.
That's
But
true.
yeah, but I think, but really, even in thinking about our own lives, how many times or sometimes we on the outside of ourselves? So it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. How that kind of, yeah, there isn't always there is those moments of just watching ourselves go through the motions, and you're trying to make sense of what's happening. At the same time, it can be disconnecting, but I hope the kind of resounding feeling at the end is her kind of coming back to herself. There
Yes.
is that was my intention anyway.
Right. And I mean, it
Yeah.
fits with the title, The Rest of You, really?
Uh,
Because it's like trying to find the rest of herself.
hmm Yep.
Missing parts of it. I mean, it all makes sense. It definitely does. But
Mm.
yes, it just was for those who do read the book, then might at first you might be like, okay, but yeah, just
Yeah.
know.
Stick with it, please.
Stick with it
But
because
also, it may not be for you. That's also fine. Like I said, some people hate it. So,
mhm. But I thought it was really good. So now, of course, we've already talked a bit about Ma Gloria because she was the eldest sister of
mhm.
three who wound up raising Whitney, who they also call Bobo.
Yes, that's it.
Sometimes you see her referred to as Bobo, sometimes as her birth name of Whitney. So we know a little about her, but her story I found also really interesting because
Mm,
she was a woman like a lot of women who made sacrifices in terms of caring for her family, but even in terms of her personal life of
mm.
having loving someone but maybe not having a traditional love relationship and things like that. So how important was it for you to include that type of story for any of your characters, but specifically Ma Gloria?
I think, I think I wanted to show, I guess, that those decisions of our elders, or and especially for people who, whose parents or guardians left one country to come to another for a better life, quote unquote.
Mhm.
I wanted to show specifically with Gloria that she was somebody who had a very strong sense of herself, and
Mhm.
she knew what she wanted from life. And although she made choices that weren't always aligned with that, it was choices that she was very consciously making these choices. So she very consciously chose,
Mhm.
the path that she chose. She consciously decided I'm going to take actually control and take Whitney to the UK, because I think that's what needs to happen.
Mhm.
And I think it speaks to, again, like growing up. There's a house full of women, and then there's this one kind of patriarch, her father, who's never actually at the house. He's kind of sometimes, again, another kind of, I wanted to that they all have like nicknames, like, depending on whose perspective you're reading.
Right.
Sometimes the father, like Whitney, Gloria's father, sorry, is the sergeant. Sometimes he's daddy. Sometimes it changes.
True.
But she is essentially becomes the matriarch of the house, and I think with that, as many of us know, comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of hopes for whoever the future of, the younger person in the house, to have this life that you want them to have. And so I wanted to show her that she's making a choice, but in the choices that a lot of our elders made, there were sacrifices that they made
Absolutely.
that would go beyond our understanding as just the children at the time, but that inevitably have an impact on how they raise us and what
Yes.
we know and who we are.
Yes, yes, yes. Her story was very interesting, and it just makes me think about sometimes, like I said, the sacrifices that we make. But
Mm.
Aretha, we have not talked about Aretha yet.
Mm.
I enjoyed her story as well. She's a little more rebellious.
Yes.
She's a rebellious auntie. So she's the one that's in the middle of the three, because Tina, who was Whitney's mother,
Yes.
it was the baby of the family. But Aretha has her own path as well. And as I said, being a little more rebellious and making some other choices. So was she
Mm.
a fun character to write for you?
I really enjoyed writing Aretha. Well, yeah. She was fun and she was also, because she was so, there's like two sides to her, which is she kind of, she has these designs of wanting to join the military in Ghana,
Mm-hmm.
after her father, and she really looks up to him, and she likes the kind of the routine and the kind of the rules of it almost, because it's a structure. But as soon as Whitney is born, that throws up everyone's plans get thrown up in the air. Also,
Right.
because Tina, Whitney's mother, and I'm not ruining anything. This is like the first few pages. Tina, Whitney's mother, dies after she gives birth, very soon after. So everything is thrown up into kind of chaos when Whitney is born. So yeah, and so Aretha's plans also change, but she also, it's almost like everybody in the house knows Aretha is not someone that's going to stay.
Right.
She's she should be like living her life, because there are also lots of parts of Aretha that she is keeping very inside, and
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't feel she can express. And again, I really don't want to give a spoiler. So she doesn't feel she can express in the current living situation that they have. So Aretha was really fun to write because she also sees things in black and white, which is, if you do a bad thing, you should pay the price.
Right.
And she's not, as I would say, Gloria is quite religious and quite God fearing.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though she might feel the same way, she's also like trying to push that uh, hatred, let's say, or dislike of something down. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
Aretha will just say the thing.
Right. She's
And
going to say it, and she's going to take action. That's what I
she's gonna
like.
take action.
Take action, Aretha. That's what we call it.
That's it.
She's going to take action. And
Yes,
I mean, let's face it, we in our lives, we sometimes need that person. I mean, depending on how
absolutely.
far you're going with it, but yeah, we need
Yeah.
people that, when you're sitting there, you can't figure it out, or, I'm mulling over for, weeks and months on end. She's like, no, this is what needs to happen.
And that's it.
And
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I really did enjoy writing Aretha and also, yeah, Maame Blue, who I'm sure you're gonna ask me about,
Yes,
who is the
yes,
third woman.
yes, but yes, just I want definitely could not bring up the other women, but Aretha really stood out to me because when we see more of her than we do of the Mame, but it's
Yes.
just that I like the fact that she was, like I said, a risk taker. She
Hmm.
was going to stand up. She was going to do, all of these different things that needed to be done and handle business and, do everything from a place of love, do everything from a
Yes.
place of care. Because really at the end of it, all three of these women are doing these things out of love. All
Yeah.
three of the elders, I should say, are doing things out of the love of Whitney and wanting to support her and make sure that she
Yeah.
a good opportunity in life, especially since she doesn't have her birth mother. So, yes,
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed Aretha. But we could talk about Maame Sarah. Am I saying
Sewa.
Sarah? Okay.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, yeah. So Mami Sewa is the house help. In and that's and her story is it's a very common kind of her origins are a very common origin where in Ghana, specifically, especially at that time, but this is still now, uh where she went to live with the family at a very young age, to
Mhm.
help support her family. She came from a village and she moves in. She kind of sends money home, um, and she happened to be in a house of a kind of family that really encourages education, and
Mhm.
so they put her through school, that kind of thing. This is very very common in Ghana, and across West Africa, I would say, but and so she feels like she's family, she's part of the family. And that's also very, if she was to go to the UK, for example, and have met Whitney, she would be auntie. She would just be auntie. Like, she's just a part of the family, even though there's no blood relation. And so
Right.
I wanted to show her, because she had the option to be objective if she wanted to be, because she's
Mhm.
technically, quote unquote, not in the family, but also she sees much more than everybody else,
Right.
because she's all over the house.
Right. Right.
She's the housekeeper, so she see who goes in and who goes out, and yeah. And so she was a really great. She was really also a really fun character to write, because I felt like she just came out as this kind of very big heart,
Mhm.
almost, of the family,
Mhm.
and a caregiver, and that made sense to me, because it also gave you a little bit more of Gloria, in
Mhm.
that Gloria was, because I think if Mami Sewa had not been there, a lot of that would have been on Gloria, in a way that it wasn't quite all on her shoulders. Gloria could entertain her other desires,
Right.
it's safe in the knowledge that Mami Sewa was taking care of things if
Right.
needed, um and again, and all of that is just how I really wanted to show all the moving parts of what a kind of family could look like. Uh, and I know a lot of people told me, like, it's so common, familiar to
Mhm.
them. And it's familiar to me, and so I guess that's why I wanted to include it.
Yes, and it was definitely good to see that, because even though it may not be a case where someone had, come to live in our home, many of us have like that godmother that,
Yes.
play auntie, that play cousin that's older or whatever, someone that really is in the family, but
Hmm.
kind of on the outskirts, so they can take a different perspective oftentimes.
Absolutely.
And kind of in the case like with Whitney's friends, that person can be a truth teller in maybe ways that other people aren't, because a lot
Mm,
of times in the family we're afraid of, or like in this case we have an elder sister or middle sister, and people feel like they have to fit into a defined role, so to speak.
absolutely. Yes, that exactly that. Like the kind of, and it happened. Of course, you're in a family. If you, especially if you grew up around like a group of people, we all eventually will revert to those roles when you're around those people in some way. And
Mm.
so there is something to having somebody slightly outside of that who cares and loves, has just as much love, but is able to, yeah, kind of uh give a different perspective and not feel like they're risking their
Right,
role in the family by
right,
saying
right. Like you might lose your job and
yeah,
work,
yeah, yeah,
but you know,
yeah,
it's
sure.
yeah, in that case, you know, in
Yeah.
extreme cases. But yes, it was good to see that, and then also just get a different perspective of what Ghanaian womanhood could be
Hmm.
in
Yeah,
that
yeah,
time.
yeah. And I think especially at that time there were a lot of, yeah, it was a lot of Ghanaians were coming over to the UK
Mhm.
and the US, but there was a big wave migration in the UK, and like coming over to study and work and bringing their families, and it was very common, and like, you know, they are a big part of the National Health Service here. Like, and I think I wanted to, because that's very much aligned with the kind of ish the period I grew up, kind of, but the yeah, I also wanted, it was fun to kind of explore that bit of it, and to see the significance of that family structure and what it translates to when you get to another country, usually
Mhm.
the West, and how
Right.
different it is.
Right, right. And
Mm.
also we get to see, really, we don't touch the United States in terms of physical locality. We do see, you know, like the Black American music, and there's times when they're like watching old TV shows, things
Yeah,
like
yeah.
those, you know, we do see that. But what we do get to see is women living in different countries. Uh,
Yes.
you know, because of course we have Ghana, then we have London, and then we also have someplace else. I'm not gonna say where.
Yeah, yeah.
You do get to see that, which is sometimes, to be honest with you, as
Mm.
a Black American woman, especially at that time, we're not necessarily going to live in all of these different places in that way.
Yeah, yeah,
So good to see that as well, and to get a little taste of what that experience might be like as a Black woman to go and live in these different places.
yeah, absolutely. And actually that, and I think, and yeah, I can't speak to that. Yeah, like you said, that journey of Black Americans traveling to Europe, let's say, but obviously Ghanaians traveling to Europe, there, you know, especially women, there, it was very common, but there, and I remember a story, this is not in the book, obviously, but I remember a story my grandmother used to tell of one of her sisters, another auntie who was already here in London before my grandmother came from Ghana, and she moved into a road, and she was obviously the only Black person on this entire road, and it was in, I think it was, yeah, early 90s, and no, early 80s even, and she did what she would do in Ghana, which is she made some food, and then she went and knocked on every person's door to bring them like some
Mm,
food, you know, and they were like, "What's this?" You know, it was like
right.
unheard of. But for her, that was like a completely, this is what you do. You go and you greet your neighbors.
Mhm.
And to learn that that wasn't how they did it, I think it went well. I don't think it was like a negative
Right, right,
experience. I think it was just a lot of people were surprised because that's not what they do here in the UK.
right,
You know,
right.
it's not. There's things are a lot more in a silo than where you might grow up, especially in Ghana. If you grew up in the village, you probably lived on a compound in like 3 generations, 4 generations of people, family living in one place, you know? Um, and so to have that kind of change, I think is different. And so I did want to show, I really wanted to show that what it's like and how Gloria is trying to hold on to what family and her sense of family is in the midst of this brand new culture that she's had to just kind of step into.
Mhm,
Mm,
mhm.
yeah.
Well, it definitely is different. Well, I can speak as a Black American. I was in the Air Force
Mm,
in the late '80s, and I was stationed actually in Spain for a couple of years. So I got a chance to go throughout
mm,
Europe. But I noticed that, you know, my experience probably would be different from, say, a Ghanaian or Nigerian or someone else who was going to the different places because they knew I was American. So
yes. That's so true. Yeah. So there's a different, you're right, because there's a different access almost, and a different understanding or assumptions, let's say, about, you
Mhm.
know, what your life might be like, or how to communicate with you in a
Mm,
way different to somebody who, yeah, especially has come from a country that isn't an English speaking country, even though
right.
technically Ghana is an English speaking country.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's diff but I think that I like that I'm able to, yeah, show that different experience. You know, I
Mm,
think it's valuable. I love to read that. I love to read other things where I'm like, oh, I've never, I don't know what that experience is like, and I'm glad I got to learn about it. Yeah.
mhm. It
Mhm.
just popped in my mind. You mentioned Gaisi's book. Was it
Yes.
Homecoming?
Homegoing.
Homegoing.
Homegoing. That's
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Thank you. I was gonna bug me.
Like
Oh, that's
40
good.
minutes
Yeah.
later, but yes,
We got there.
we got
Homegoing. That's
there. We
exactly what I
got
was talking
there.
about. Thank you.
Yes, yes. I met her years and years ago at
Oh.
a book festival. So yes, that's a good one for
Mm,
sure. But it definitely speaks to we do potentially all have different experiences based upon where we come from and things like that. Another thing that I did like though also with Whitney and her peer group that
mm,
they were all women of color or
mhm,
persons
mhm,
of color, but
mhm.
yet even there was a diversity in who they were, and that's something that you often see in London and places like that as well. That people are diverse. It's not well, we're not a monolith here either, but you definitely see it from the standpoint of people coming from different countries and ending up in this space.
Yeah, yeah, and especially I guess London, like a lot of major cities, there's a um yes, there's such a mixing of ethnicities and cultures, and it's a very transient place. Um, and I think it's the London specific thing, I guess, is the kind of the the culture of the place then when you come to live here from somewhere else, or or even actually if you grew up Black British, like I said. So you've got Whitney, whose heritage is Ghanaian, but she's grown up most of her life in London. And then Chantel, one of her best friends, her heritage is Caribbean, uh, and a little bit of Malaysian, and but also grew up in the UK. So the kind of present culture that they experience is very similar,
Mm.
even if the heritage is different. And there are just lots of crossing overs points. And then also for Jack, obviously they are kind of Malaysian Australian. So
Right,
and then again, so there's that kind of for me that's totally like normal. Like I'm like,
right,
yeah,
right.
and I wanted to show that yeah, the diversity of it as this kind of the meeting, how these three people can come together and meet at a really kind of significant place. Um, even though their beginnings are might be different, but there's a crossover in how they approach life and how they see themselves and what they think about life and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, one of the big themes that we see throughout the book, because believe it or not, our time is almost up.
Oh.
But one of the things we see a lot, and many of us are, well, I say I am, a lot of people are familiar with the concept of Sankofa, but
Hmm.
it comes up in the book,
Mhm.
multiple times because it is a key part of the story of basically, the past, the present, the future. So just talk a little bit about, including that concept in the book.
Yeah, I think that came very early on, and I'm sure I was thinking about it for something else. I think I I was thinking about it. I might have been writing something, and I was thinking about this idea of Sankofa, this you're unable to, the idea of looking back in order to move forward. That's really what it's about. And the irony of it being, yes, it's in the book, it kind of goes throughout it, but Whitney actually is not that familiar with it at all, which speaks very much to the gaps that she has about her even Ghanaian heritage, because there are things that Magloire just won't talk about, and she kind of discovers its significance a bit later in her life. Um, but I also was thinking about it as I know it's such a significant, kind of saying and concept for so many people, I think,
Yes.
in the diaspora. And I know, like, I remember, I think, what was it, 2020? Don't test me on this. 2022, the year of whenever the year of return was in Ghana.
I
Yeah,
think it
and
was, or
I
something
think
like.
it was 2020. Yeah, and yes, of course, there was a kind of a big invite for specifically for Black Americans to come to Ghana, uh, and almost like a kind of comeback, or let's reclaim some of what might have been lost and the journeys that were lost. And I really I wanted to hone in on it on a smaller scale, on a very personal. This is just Whitney's journey,
Right.
even though because she could still, she at least has the option of, if she wanted to, she could do a family tree and she could see how far her family went. She happened to have somebody who was not that willing to share, but eventually, she had other people that she could do that with. And I feel I can also do that, and I find it's profound to me. I feel very privileged to think, oh, I could, if I wanted to, I could just do a family tree. And that is not the case for a whole generation, few generations of people in America at all. And so I think maybe that is also what speaks to people in the novel, based on kind of some of the feedback I've had about the idea of the way that you search for history and heritage, and the way that you find answers that make sense to you, even if you don't get the whole thing.
Right. Right.
But what you get is something that brings you a sense of peace.
Yes.
And that's kind of what, for Whitney, I wanted to show. Yes, there's all these gaps, and she's slowly reclaiming memories and retrieving memories and stuff. But also, what does she do with it afterwards? And I wanted to leave it with a bit of hope that the bits that she can find are going to have a meaningful impact on the rest of her life.
Yes. Yes. That really is powerful, because people have heard me say before that I know folks who live in the past, and I don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that was 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. We can't stay there. But there is some value in sometimes taking a look back just to understand some things, or to get information, or like we see Whitney doing, to maybe ask some questions that you might not get an answer to right away, but at some point, people may be more willing to talk or share about things that are going on. But I think it is important, because it doesn't have to define who you are, but it can help you give you a better understanding of from which you came.
Absolutely. Exactly that. Could have put it better myself.
So yes, so I love that, that you do that throughout the book. And we didn't talk about it because there are some tough topics in there. So just when you get ready to read it,
Yes.
everybody understand there's some things in there that, because people are dealing with different forms of trauma. So, just understanding that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I would definitely. It's not a. It's definitely a read in pieces kind of story. But yeah, I think yes, there are definitely elements of some trauma in there. So I want people to just be like, take care of yourself before you open it, and yeah, go at your pace.
Right, right. But to get through that, and to like really dive into the story and the characters and the characterization, I feel like everybody's going to get something out of it for sure. But I do want to talk about this cover. I don't know. I'm
Yes.
trying to get as close as I can. That you see, it's like the face of a person, and then inside the head is like I'm gonna say like their inner child inside.
Yeah. It's so one of my very good friends. He is mostly a children's illustrator. I mean, he's an artist, but Dapo Adiola, and he's written he's illustrated and now written lots of children's books. He wrote this book. He illustrated this book, Look Up, and I think it was doing quite well in America. But we had talked about this cover a year or so before the book was even ready to be like in the world, and we just talked about the book, and then
Right.
he hadn't even read the whole thing. I sent him like a summary, and he came up with this, and I was
Wow.
like, "How did you do that?" I was like, "Because if you've I said, did you read the book?" And he was like, "I haven't had time to read the book. I was just going off what you told me." And
Wow.
he just created this incredible image that kind of every time I look at it, it's like a bit of a gut, but it's exactly. And once you read the book, it's like you understand the cover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'll admit, when I first looked at it, I just thought, oh, that's bright and colorful. But then when I really, really looked, I was like, oh,
There's like layers. There's layers in there.
layers to it. There's layers
Yeah.
and levels to it. So I love
Yeah.
that.
He's
I
very
love
talented.
that. So, well, thank you so much, Maame,
Okay.
for being with us, for coming on to talk about the rest of you. I am really excited for, you having, the kudos that you're getting for the book. I'm adding mine to that list.
Thank
And
you,
I
Marcy.
really want people to get out and read the book and, absorb it and share it, have conversations about it, because it is something that is definitely a conversation starter. So for you, of course, it's not even 30 days old yet in terms of the US. When did it come out in the UK?
It came out on the 29th of October.
Okay.
So
Okay.
like a week ago? Less than
Oh,
a week.
okay.
A
It's
week
even
ago. I think a week ago today.
okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, America got it first.
Okay. All right. So I know that, of course, when you're in the process of, promoting your book and stuff like that, you have a lot of things going on. Are there any opportunities that you will be in the US or places where people might be able to be on the lookout for you?
Not at the moment. I'm doing a lot of online things, and my brain has gone blank. No,
Okay.
I'm doing, and there are a couple of like workshops and things I'm offering online. I am at a festival in Nigeria, in
Oh,
Lagos,
okay.
in a couple of weeks. It's called Ake Festival, literary festival. So if anybody is, going to be around, I think they live stream a lot of their stuff as well.
Okay.
So you can kind of check me out there. But for updates, you can just go on my website, and anything that does come up, I'll put it on there. And I'm sure there'll be other kind of stuff I'll be doing in the US, be virtually, for now.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. Well, that sounds good. And of course, we purposely put all the socials and the website there. It's been scrolling the whole time so people can follow Maame and see where she's going to be, what she's got going on. And of course, now add her book to the canon of great Black women writers, international Black women writers, and always be on the lookout for what's to come, which I'll ask her offline. You all will have to wait. But thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for, fitting us into your schedule so we can do this pre-recording and everyone can get a chance to be introduced to your work and to you and the wonderful things that you're doing. So again,
Thank
congratulations.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your brilliant questions and a very great chat. I can't believe it's over. Yeah, I appreciate you. So thank you, Marcy.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Everybody, look to see us again, or me again in the next week. In the meantime, between time, please go out and grab copies of the rest of you from your favorite bookseller and spread the word about this great and wonderful book. Everybody, until the next time, take good care. Bye-bye.